This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. Well, now that we're firmly established in double digits, welcome to episode 11. One thing you can always count on, these episodes will always be completely different from any of the others, in many ways. Much like GBR is quite different from most other podcasts. Have you noticed that? One of the most glaring differences is heard often in one of our main slogans. You've heard it, no idle chatter. Our show is tightly produced, and there's a reason for that beyond just my personal preference, and that is respect for your time. And while we hear from a number of folks that they listen to the show while they work, which is great, love that, not everybody can do it. Most probably can't. So the time that you have left to devote to listening to podcasts is usually limited. And because this is a business-focused show, we're all about value. And I'm not saying that idle chatter doesn't have some entertainment value in some cases. I'm sure it does. And I do hope that you may be occasionally entertained here, but it likely won't be from idle chatter. So if you listened to our last episode, we started talking about getting to the next level in your business or career. And we're going to be exploring that idea in many different directions in this and upcoming episodes. This is a huge and universal concept, but it means something different to virtually everyone. So we're going to try to present information and experiences and suggestions that you can get some value from one way or another, regardless of what you are doing or what your situation is. So in today's interview, I'm going to be joined by a very interesting guy who's been the monthly repair columnist for Vintage Guitar magazine for like the last 12 years. I'll be talking to Will Kelly, who's going to share with us, among other things, how one big break took his career and business to the next level and then created a world of opportunity. So stick around for that. In the meantime, there's this. This is your source for profoundly interesting news briefs. Guitar Business Radio presents The Shorts. So today we're introducing a new feature within the shorts that will be showing up with some irregularity, but probably once every month or two. Kind of uncertain at this time, but it's about crowdfunding. Now, I know this is also a huge topic area, so I'm going to try to keep it contained with some relevancy to our listeners. For me, I got involved with crowdfunding several years ago, helping some of our clients at Guitar PR to market their Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns. So I've tried to stay on top of things as best I could, mostly regarding guitar-related projects. So I scan these platforms now and then to see what's new and what's working. Now, as many of you know, these platforms have evolved beyond just raising startup capital into what are in many cases like sales platforms. And while Kickstarter seems to have remained close to its original mission, Indiegogo has over time expanded its offering into ongoing or after-campaign fundraising with something called in-demand, as well as an independent marketplace that is disconnected from the campaign side. What they're doing with the marketplace suggested to me something like, a mashup between crowdfunding and Sharper Image, but we'll have to see what happens there. So one of the things we're going to be doing here is checking in on some ongoing guitar-related crowdfunding projects and possibly reporting on projects that were successfully funded, what followed, and where they are now. But today, I want to just bring a couple of campaigns to your attention. And by the way, these are not going to be reviews because remember, we do no reviews and no demos. Now, French guitar builder Alquier Guitars has created a Kickstarter campaign to launch their new eco-friendly guitar called the Cosmic One, which is built largely from bamboo and with titanium hardware. These are very modern, almost space-age looking instruments, but what struck me as interesting about this campaign is the amount of money they're looking to raise. Only $14,775, US dollars, that is. And that's the converted amount from, I guess, French, whatever it is, euros. My guess is they set the number low to assure that they would meet the goal and then move beyond that to raise a larger amount that would be consistent with their more hopeful goal. If so, the strategy seems to have worked because as of this moment, with 27 days left in the campaign, they've already raised over $16,000. So they'll get the money because it's all or nothing. But it will be interesting to watch what ultimately happens, and we'll follow up and report on that. Now, also on Kickstarter, another project I saw. This one is for a string bending attachment known as Pitch Pilot. This is a fairly simple device that attaches to the bridges of Les Pauls and other Gibsons, as well as Telecasters and Strats, and it allows you to bend single strings up or down. You can apparently attach more than one of these to a guitar, for instance, one on the B string and one on the low E. I guess there's other combinations as well. On the surface, it looks like an inexpensive way to achieve B-bender-like capabilities on any string or strings without any modification to the instrument. Now, you'd think that the price point of $69 versus the cost of any other bender product, people would be jumping for these. And obviously, marketing crowdfunding campaigns makes much of the difference in terms of reaching goals. But of course, that assumes that the product has market appeal and does what it says it's supposed to do. So all I can tell you about this project is that as of today, with 25 days to go, they're at about 3% funding with $977 out of a $27,400 goal. So we'll see. Again, we'll watch both of these campaigns for the next month, and we'll let you know what happened. And if you'd like to follow these campaigns yourself, you can get the links on our website, guitarbusinessradio.com. Under the Episodes tab, just click on The Shorts. And one other thing I want to mention about Kickstarter is that they have another site called Drip. This is designed to support creative endeavors with ongoing funding, apparently to offer some competition for Patreon, although Drip is an invitation-only platform at the moment, and it's not certain yet when they'll open it up fully. And speaking of Patreon, as you know, we launched our own Patreon program a few days back, and while we have a few supporters already, I believe this effort will unfold as most long-term activities do in a gradual, sequential, and cumulative way. In other words, it may take a while. However, in this case, to be perfectly honest with you, I suppose I could be proven wrong. So if you want to be the one who proves me wrong on this, just visit us at patreon.com/guitarbusiness and become a GBR supporter. You will receive a personal thank you of epic proportions directly from me, and of course other rewards and benefits depending on how serious you are about it. Now for something completely different. Well, if you're one of the more than 70,000 readers of Vintage Guitar Magazine, and on top of that, the digital version, you probably know the name Will Kelly. Now, that's because he's been writing a monthly guitar repair column and feature articles there for the last 12 years. And while he shares quite a family history in the music business, the real story here is how a big break came along and took his career and business to the next level and changed everything for the better. We'll hear about that and much more as Will Kelly joins us right here and right now. Will, thanks for coming on the show today with us. Great to have you on.
Well, Jeff, this is going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this. I want to tell you, this program is really well produced. I've listened to it. It's on point. I think you're a useful resource, and I listen to you while I'm in the shop working, so kudos, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate that. I've actually heard that from a few other folks, too. We listen to it while we're making pedals or whatever thing. So, that's always good to hear. Well, let's dive in and find out a little bit more about Will Kelly. I usually like to start off with what I call foundational stuff, and maybe I'm going to develop a reputation for that. But I think it tends to give us an idea of what somebody's business or their career is built on. And, you have some really interesting family history, among other things, that it seemed to me would ultimately help shape things for you and in your later life. And I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, it's definitely one of those genetics versus environment arguments. My family on my mother's side is the Darden family. And if you're from the Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina area, you should know who they are. They had the first television entertainment hour or family hour on TV in Richmond, and I think it was 1946, 1947, something like that, with another family, the Carter family. And it was the Darden Carter Family Hour on WTAR in Richmond. And so that was sort of the legacy that I grew up hearing about and seeing. I've seen photographs of Johnny Cash in his underwear sitting at my aunt's kitchen table. My uncle wrote songs with Willie Nelson for Patsy Cline. And my Aunt Miriam, that's a story unto itself. Her stage name is Susie Arden. And she was one of the first female electric guitar endorsement artists in the world. She was the first person to ever own a Rickenbacker 12-string.
Wow.
Frances Hall, who owned Rickenbacker at the time, was enamored of her and decked out her entire band, which was the stage band at the Stardust Casino in Las Vegas in the early 60s.
Oh, wow. That goes back.
Yeah.
Sure.
And, back in the Rat Pack days.
I'm afraid to say I remember that, but that's okay.
Well, the only thing I remember from it is seeing her albums, on my mom's record player, or when at Christmas or Thanksgiving, talking to Aunt Miriam, and I was wondering why she was wearing gold lame when the rest of us were, wearing what we were wearing.
Denim.
But she's an incredible woman. Yeah, denim. She got the first Rickenbacker 12-string electric, and George Harrison, some guy with the Beatles or something.
Yeah, I remember vaguely.
Yeah, he got the second one. So she was the very first person in the world to ever own and play a Rick 12. And once again, that's just the legacy I grew up with. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, all were in bands. I remember seeing newsreel footage. Remember in well, you probably don't, but in the 30s and 40s, in between movie feature shows at the movie theater, they used to show little film shorts, newsreels, and things like that. Yeah. And I've actually seen newsreels from the 30s of my family sitting around a wagon at the farm playing hillbilly music, is what they call it. Bluegrass hadn't been invented yet. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the legacy I grew up with, and it really impacted me tremendously. So when I grew up, I wanted to play guitar and sing and be in a band and write, because that's what you did in my family. Yeah, especially around the kitchen table.
So it's kind of in your blood, one way or the other, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's always been a dichotomy to me, because, the pressure is to grow up and have a family and get married, have a family, and be a responsible day business guy. And I did that. And then at night I would put on my denims and load up the guitars in the car and go play all night in a bar. And, it just was a rough existence, because half of me wanted to be, a musician, and some other half said, no, you got to be responsible and do all that. I finally found a way to make it work.
You got to pay the rent. But that's a perfect lead in to what I was going to ask you next. And certainly it's not an uncommon part of the story, but for a lot of people. But you spent, as you say, quite a number of years with a so-called day job, which we've all had before you were really able to fully transition into, the business that you've been pursuing now for quite a while. So I'm kind of curious as to what you can tell us about that period, and more precisely, how that contributed to what you're doing now.
Well, I was an IT sales engineer, and that basically is the interface between what a client says they need and what the geek nerds in the back that are writing the codes and wiring up the gear give them. So you have to be an interpreter. And it really served my psyche well, because of the duality of my nature, the creative side and the practical side. So I got really good at that, and I learned how to interface with a variety of people and speak their language on their terms and not be disingenuous doing it. I also learned how to put together a coherent business proposal, and make a sales pitch, and how to learn the good habits of, returning calls and emails and contacts promptly, and doing your work on time, and being fiscally responsible with your resources. So, there's a lot of business acumen that comes from 20-something years in that arena that apply universally, whether it's music business, pharmaceutical business, diaper business, whatever it is.
That's correct. You're right about that. That's very valuable.
So that was really what drove me in the transition, was taking that perspective on really every decision and every fork in the crossroads that I came to. And it helped me limit the bad choices. I didn't say I'm not making, I didn't make any, but it really helped me kind of cut down on the mistakes, because if you apply common sense that you've learned in the real business arena to things that come your way, business opportunity-wise on a personal level, tends to work out well if you follow the same guideline.
Well, I've said in a prior episode, I think I covered it in one of my value shots, the idea that I had eliminated the word failure in my vocabulary some years ago and just filed all of that stuff in R&D. And it sounds to me like that's kind of how you've approached it. Then it becomes a contributing factor to something better. And whether it's had a positive or negative effect in real time, sometimes we have to go through that stuff to build on the foundation to get to the next place. Would you agree?
I'll give you a very concrete real-world analogy to summarize what you just said. If you ever want to see mistakes, go look at a luthier's wood pile, because you'll see necks that are cut incorrectly, and maybe bodies that are gouged or routed wrong, and all these mistakes that you make along the way. You don't throw them away, you recycle them eventually. And you make cutting boards out of them, and you make, knickknacks with the wood, but you don't waste the lesson. And every time you go to the wood pile to draw a new piece of wood out, you look over at your discard bin, and there are your mistakes staring you in the face. But to me, they're learning opportunities, and you won't see two pieces of wronged wood in the same pile. You'll see different things wrong with everything,
sure,
but you won't see the two identical mistakes sitting in that pile.
Yeah, that's a really effective way to put it. Let's move on to the next thing here. Now, the thing that really kind of drove me and drove my interest in having you on the show is, and a lot of people will recognize you because of that for as long as you've been doing it, but you've been a monthly columnist for Vintage Guitar Magazine for something like 12 years or so now, and in every issue of the magazine. So that certainly had some benefits from the business perspective. What kinds of doors has that opened up for you, and how has it helped expand your knowledge base? Well,
honestly, I was the luckiest guy in the world when I got that column, and I owe a lot of props to Ward Meeker, the editor at Vintage Guitar Magazine, for taking a chance on an unknown. But I'd found out through Dan Erlewine, who's the other monthly repair columnist, there's two repair columns, that Tony Nobles, who was a luthier out of Texas, was and been writing the column for well over a decade himself, was getting ready to cease doing that. He was kind of getting tired of doing it and wanted to move on to some other things. So Dan suggested that I send an email to Ward and make a pitch to him. So I sat down and I thought about it, rather than just cranking something off the top of my head. I thought, what is this going to be about? And so in that first 30 minutes or so, I think I probably had the bare bones company statement, for what my career from then on was going to be about. It's kind of weird that those 30 minutes kind of determined the name, the brand that I do, what I do, who watches and who listens and who reads me, and who ultimately sends me money, pays my salaries.
And you mentioned the name, and I wanted to bring that up because it's an unusual name, and we've kind of captured that in our promo stuff for this episode. Tell us about Hard Knocks. How did that name come about?
Well, prior to 2006, I had built guitars under my own name. It was at first Kelly Guitars and then Will Kelly, but there was a lot of import guitars being shipped in the United States starting around that time from a brand named Michael Kelly, and a lot of confusion on that standpoint. So coincidentally, at the same time, I was given the opportunity to begin writing the column for Vintage Guitar Magazine. So part of my pitch to the editors was that the column was going to be about street-level basic repairs and just things that your average Joe could do at the kitchen table at night after dinner. And it was going to be called The Shop of Hard Knocks. And so a light bulb went off at that moment for me, and I thought, okay, from now on, I build Hard Knocks guitars. And it says so much about me and the guitars and, you know, how they're built and what they're built to withstand and kind of, you know, what I do in a nutshell. Perfect.
Well, it kind of struck me, obviously, as it would probably to most people, that it's kind of an extension of what a lot of people refer to as the School of Hard Knocks. And I'm just kind of wondering if there was any similarity in your thinking, or did it represent that kind of learning experience along the way, or was it something entirely different?
Well, it's actually a combination of two things. First off, I learned my craft by destroying a ton of yard sale and flea market cheap guitars, trying to refret them and trying to refinish them and trying to repair them. That's how I learned. And I literally learned at the School of Hard Knocks. And then at some point, YouTube became prevalent in the online availability of instructional videos and things like that. So I started learning a lot of things that way and practicing on unwilling victims. And at some point, the body count got really high, but I slowly got confident in my skill sets, but always was trying to improve. And at some point, there was a saturation on YouTube where I think they reached, you know, they were loading 1,000 videos every minute, you know, onto content.
It's amazing.
And I saw a problem because when I searched for something really simple, like how to cut a nut slot or something like that for guitar repair, you'll see hundreds, literally hundreds of videos pop up. Now, you as a viewer go, okay, who do I trust? You know, who actually knows what they're talking about, or who is going to do this using the tools that I have available, or who's going to do this and explain it to me in a way that I can really understand and I'd be willing to take the leap and faith and try this. So I kept running into that at every step along my search for gaining knowledge. And I thought, wow, why don't I concentrate on developing through my column, through my video YouTube channel, a definitive philosophy, which is you can do this because you've got a kitchen table and a basic set of tools and a good understanding, and you've got a really trusted guide in me, and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do basic stuff together. We're going to get you through 90% of what you're going to see. And I'll help you identify things that you don't want to do yourself and you want to take to a pro. But I'll save you money. I'll teach you more about your instrument, and I'll help you become a wiser consumer in the long run. So I become an educational resource through these multiple media outlets. And that was my goal and my focus from the beginning.
And you've certainly expanded on that over the years in a number of different ways. I mean, from a business standpoint, I mean, I'm not sure that multitasker is really the right word, but I was trying to think of something that generically explains what you've been able to do, you know, in adding a variety of, I sometimes call it repurposing, multi-purposing, just expanding the reach of the work. And it seems to me that you've done that. Now, one of the things that probably a lesser number of people know about you is that you have been building guitars on a commercial level, not probably as well known, because I'm not sure that you advertise that a lot or publish that a lot. But the bottom line is that you've had some significant success and have built instruments for some fairly well-known people. And especially just recently, you built a guitar for John Oates, which I thought was a pretty interesting thing to do, because you documented, you got a couple of lengthy YouTube videos that talk about and show a lot of the progress of building this particular guitar. And I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history of that and how that came about and what you ended up doing for John Oates.
Well, John and I have been friends for a number of years. He actually was, I did a feature interview piece with him for the magazine. And his guitar tech at the time was a local Raleigh, North Carolina boy, which is where I reside. So I'd gotten to know John and become friends. And I think it was a show probably 2 years ago. I was hanging out backstage during sound check that afternoon before the gig, and John pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, I just read your article in Vintage Guitar Magazine about using this wood." And what he was talking about was I had done a piece in the column about this special wood from New Zealand called Ancient Swamp Kauri, Kauri, that's 50,000 years old. It's mined out of the ground. It blew down in these swamps before the last ice age. So this wood's very special, very rare, and very beautiful. John said, we're getting ready to do a tour of Australia and New Zealand in a couple of months, and I was wondering if you could build a guitar for me out of that wood being from New Zealand. I thought, hey, that's a great idea. So he and I corresponded via email for a couple of weeks, back and forth, throwing design ideas and things like that, and ended up building a really beautiful guitar that he uses every night. And, it's got a bunch of press on its own. But he's a cool guy, really knows his instruments, and really easy to work with. Super dude.
Yeah, I would encourage people to visit your YouTube channel. And they can just search for Will Kelly, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all you got to do. Just Will Kelly or Vintage Guitar Magazine, and you'll find me real easy.
Yeah. So I would say take a look at those. You want to see the building of this particular instrument. So let me ask you something a little more subjective. Some of the things that I ask a number of people, but as you look back at your career now, I mean, is there anybody or any people that you would consider to be the most influential or the most inspiring for you that, has made a difference in your life and what you're doing?
Yeah, actually, there's one guy. Let me preface this by saying in 1993, I went to an Eric Clapton concert in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, not to see Eric Clapton, but to watch his guitar tech. Guy's name was Lee Dixon, Scottish fella, and just a legend among guitar techs. He's been with Eric Clapton since 1974. So I wanted to see Lee and watch him do his job and everything because he was so famous, and that's what I was into. Well, flash forward about 10 years to 2005, I believe it was, and a mutual friend of ours, a guy named John Matos, or Crash, as he's well known, he's a graffiti artist that painted a lot of Eric Clapton's Stratocasters, introduced me to Lee. And at that point, my life kind of changed because, A, this guy is a legend, but he was my hero. I mean, everything I ever wanted to know, everything I ever wanted to do with guitars and artists, Lee'd already done it. I mean, from Muddy Waters to B.B. King to Eric Clapton to Jeff Beck to Pete Townsend to David Gilmour. You name it, he's worked with them all. Ultimate, consummate professional and just an incredible person. So after a year or two of really becoming good friends over, phone and email and stuff like that, and invited him to my shop for a week. I said, hey, I'd like for you to come by here and maybe you could teach me some things. So he graciously flew over and came and worked at my shop for a week, which is just mind-blowing unto itself.
Did you at least feed him?
I took very, very good care of my friend. So, but the weird thing was at that point is just that I learned that what this guy did better than anybody else and why Eric Clapton kept him around for 35 years and why he is a legend is not the guitar skills. It was the people skills. It was the ability to make anybody that he met instantly feel welcome and relaxed and friendly. And he could have you up on the roof retiling his house in 10 minutes if he really turned the charm on. But it wasn't a disingenuous thing. It was a very authentic way that he just deals with people. And I've seen him in stressed situations. I've seen him with unbelievable pressure on him. And I've seen him relaxed. And he's the same guy every time. And I think that's the moral of that story is that the man's a legend and the man is, peerless. because of this combination of skills, people skills, technical skills, just situational and survival skills. Wow. He's just an amazing guy, and I'm lucky to call him my best friend in the world now.
Yeah, that's excellent. Wow, that's a great story. I mean, that's really well done, and thank you for sharing that with us. And finally, I'm starting to, on this show, we're starting to talk about this next level business, getting to the next level. And so for a number of episodes now, I'm going to be talking about different aspects of that and kind of integrating that into the show and the interviews. And I want to kind of cap this off by putting that question to you. What is the next level for Will Kelly? How would you answer that?
Well, I could sound really jaded and arrogant and say, well, I've written a best-selling book and got a monthly column with 100,000 readers and thousands of YouTube followers and all that. But that's really not what's important to me. The important thing is that I grow my skill set. And nowadays, with technology being as it is, I've seen the advent of CNC or computer-controlled carving machines. Prices really just drop out the bottom. So what I'm going to explore is a means of enhancing my craft, my production quality, and my consistency, is seeing how I could possibly integrate some CNC machinery into what I do as a builder and learn that craft as well.
Wow. Well, that's really a worthy goal. And I guess that we're going to watch that and revisit that down the road, and we can talk again and sort of kind of get an update and see how that went.
I promise you, I'll post the failures and successes on my channel as I move on.
Well, you won't be posting failures.
So you learn with me.
You'll be posting R&D.
There you go.
We won't call them failures. And I just want to tell everybody that and encourage them to go to Vintage Guitar, and your columns can be read either on the digital edition, and there are a variety of archives that are available, or in the hard copy version of the magazine. There's lots and lots of columns by Will Kelly, and you have a unique approach and an area that you're helping people with, and I think that's really valuable. And I really do appreciate you sharing all this stuff with us here on the show.
Well, I'm really grateful to tell my story, because I'm not that much different than your average music enthusiast sitting around his kitchen table at night. I just was given an opportunity via the column. And then, once you get your foot in the door, it's really about what you do with that opportunity. And I think I just took all this business knowledge that I had and made the right choices, and have had a great ride along the way. Well, and you're still riding. I was going to say you're on the horse, but maybe you're behind the wheel, or whatever the metaphor. I prefer to say behind the bandsaw. Yeah, whatever the metaphor is, we can do it. Well, listen, once again, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll be in touch. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for everything. You got it. So in the last episode, I started an ongoing discussion about taking your business or career to the next level. And there's all kinds of stuff written on this subject all over the place. But like I said, my approach is to give this to you in foundational chunks that you can apply to your basic thinking. This keeps it simple and easier to implement. Now, in the process of getting to the next level, whatever that is for you, I said that the first thing that needs to be present when initiating a move to the next level is vision. And while the vision needs to be clear to you, it does not have to be exact in terms of how it will come to fruition. Visions can and usually do change and evolve, so you don't want to be constrained with a narrow view of how things should unfold. In fact, in my opinion, you want the widest possible view of all the options to ensure the best possible result. So the first step is visualizing what your next level looks and feels like, and maintaining that image as though it's already happening. It's a commonly held belief that this crystallizes the path you're on and helps attract the pieces of the puzzle that you're putting together. I also think it's helpful to keep regular notes or documentation on the vision that you can refer to later as needed. If you've not listened to the value shot in episode 10 in its entirety, I would certainly recommend it. Now let's talk a bit about implementing the vision. There are some basic components, and I'd like to cover a couple of them briefly with you today. And like I said, I'm giving this to you in small chunks so you can build this into your foundational thinking.
But remember, we're also producing these value shot segments by themselves with a special audio version and complete written transcripts for each one, which makes it easier to refer back to. And you can get immediate access to all of them right away when you sign up as a GBR supporter on Patreon with a commitment of just $10 or more. So there are, in my view, a few behavioral characteristics that are important in seeing your vision become a reality. First, there is attitude. This is so critical, and as obvious as it sounds, it may very well be the most prevalent area of dysfunction. I mean, doesn't everybody think they have the right attitude? Not always the case. So remember, I like sets of 3. So here's 3 elements to look for in attitude when trying to move your vision forward. First, I think of polarity. Are you positive or negative? Well, that's a big topic in itself, and I don't know about you, but I know a lot of negative people who think they are extremely positive. I guess that's most likely because it's just a facade of sorts, and underlying that is really a lot of negative instincts, and that's generally a prescription for more R&D, which of course is where we reclassified all of our so-called failures. But you get it, right? Look, if you can't approach this with genuine positivity, you're going to have an uphill climb on the long haul. Now, the second thing is your view. Are you long-term or short-term? Are you able to see your vision as an incremental part of your bigger destination? And again, that does not imply that you have to know all the hows and whys of everything. But as I said in part 1, the decisions you make regarding your vision should support the path to your destination. I believe that you'll make better decisions as a result. And the third thing is, are you doing this for love or money? My sense is that if you choose either one over the other, your vision is at risk. When we're talking about business or career, you probably have to choose both. And all I'm saying here, which is consistent with what I've been saying, is that you better love what you're doing, and you ought to make sure that you're adequately compensated or supported in the process. That's kind of a no-brainer, but check those boxes. Your prospects are going to be greatly enhanced. Now, the other component I want to mention is focus. Without it, you may not be able to assemble the pieces of the puzzle. You can easily leave a critical piece out, and things may come to a screeching halt. So again, here are 3 elements to think about. First is clarity. Now, I've used this term before, but in this context, focus requires clarity. And my view is always that clarity requires simplicity. So strive for simplicity wherever possible. Second is discipline. And I'm not talking about obsessive behavior here. That can throw you off just as easily. This is about order and organization. And I know it's not easy for some people, but again, if you strive for simplicity, it's much easier to keep things in order. If you need to add complexity, you can do so without losing sight of the basic order of things. Discipline supports clarity. And the third element is routine. I know some folks feel that they need routines in all aspects of their professional and personal lives, while others are on the opposite end of the spectrum and prefer a free-form approach to everything. Here's how I try to deal with routines. I'm kind of a hybrid character. I suspect I got the creative gene from my mom and the sales gene from my dad. So rather than create conflict between those traits, which I did so well in my younger days, I figured out how to create harmony between them and achieve the best of both worlds. And that's what I suggest when it comes to establishing routines. Use them as leverage. It's empowering. If you're overly dependent on routines, my view is that you'll have to step out of them from time to time in order to grow and create. Get comfortable with stepping out of the comfort zone, but keep it balanced. The same goes for the free spirit in you. You may resist routine, but the good news is that empowerment generally feels pretty good. Adding the appropriate amount of routine supports discipline, and it's all connected. In the next episode, we'll continue the quest to the next level. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, thoughts, or suggestions on any of this, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, these are my thoughts and opinions. I learned most of this from other sources and put it together the way I see it. If something's not clear to you, let me know. As always, thanks so much for listening. Stay positive, stay focused on your destination, and keep all the options open on how you're going to get there. And I'll see you on episode 12. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.